A little over a month ago, I made a video covering why Asian baseball teams have English nicknames, and it kind of popped off by my standards. So with other projects of mine hitting roadblocks, I thought, well, I've explained why the names are in English, but I only really explained how one team got their nickname, the Yomiuri Giants. So I thought I'd give you a rundown on the nickname history of all 12 NPB clubs and how they got those nicknames. I was originally going to cover the KBO and the CPBL as well, but the project quickly spiraled a bit out of control. The CPBL nicknames were also much harder to find the origins of. Since most of the KBO script is already done, if this video breaks, 500 likes, I'll make that one as well. Longtime viewers of this channel may remember that I've technically made this video before, but I wasn't really proud of it at all, so I chose to delete it. So hey, what better time to remake and expand that video? So without further ado, let's jump into it. The Chunichi Dragons were founded as the Nagoya Baseball Club in 1936, with their original owners being the Shin Aichi Shimbun. That newspaper was forced to merge with the Nagoya Shimbun during the Second World War, which led to the dissolution of the Nagoya Shimbun's team, the Nagoya Golden Dolphins. The new paper, the Chiba Nippon Shimbun, would own the team until 1944, when they were briefly owned by the Zaibatsu Riken, giving them the name the Sangyo Baseball Club. Chiba Nippon would take back control of the team in 1946 and adopt the contraction Chunichi as their official name. And Chunichi as a company has always been dominated by two halves that make up the whole, the Oshima family and the Koyama family. The Oshima family owned the Shinaichi Shimbun, and the Koyama family owned the Nagoya Shimbun. However, both families were temporarily barred from running the paper after the Second World War, so Toranosuke Sugiyama became the new chairman of the paper. When the nickname mandate came in after the 1946 season, Sugiyama decided that he wanted to call the team something in reference to him. He originally wanted to use the name Tigers because the Tora in his name is also the Japanese word for tiger, but the Osaka Tigers had locked up that nickname for a decade now. Still wanting to name the team in reference to him, he decided to use his Chinese zodiac symbol. Sugiyama was born in 1904, which was the year of the dragon, so the team became the Chunichi Dragons. In the early 1950s, the Nagoya Railway would buy into the team, leading to the team adopting the name Nagoya Dragons, but after the 1953 season they would pull out, citing financial reasons. 1953 would also see the resignation of Toranosuke Sugiyama from Chunichi following an embezzlement scandal. However, any calls to change the nickname would be silenced when the club won the 1954 Japan Series. Thus, the team has been the Chunichi Dragons ever since. Also founded by a newspaper, the team we now know as the Chiba Lotte Marines were founded in 1949 by the Mainichi Shimbun. Mainichi had already been running a successful semi-pro team, the Mainichi Stars, throughout the 1940s, but had been barred from turning them fully pro because Mainichi hadn't exactly been buddy-buddy with existing JPBL clubs. Mainichi, being a centrist paper, had often run stories countering both the center-right Yomiuri and the center-left Chunichi, and that had left both sides infuriated with them. Mainichi would eventually throw their hands in the air and elect to try and start a breakaway league instead. This had already been tried by another group post-war, and that had folded after 2 seasons, which weren't really seasons, but that's a story for another day. Still, in the couple years since that league folded, other companies were wanting a slice of the pro baseball pie, and Mainichi's new breakaway league attracted a lot of interest. So much so that Mainichi was able to poach quite a few star players, including Osaka Tigers star Kaoru Beto. Eventually, rounds of talks led to the establishment of the Central and Pacific League and the overarching governing body NPB. If you've ever noticed why half of NPB's teams are older than the league itself, this is why. Still, it also meant that Mainichi couldn't use their preferred name. Not only did the BayStars already have it, but they'd also elected to join the Pacific League. So Mainichi said, screw it, it's bigger than a star, a constellation. They chose Orions after the constellation of the same name, with the 3 stars on their logo being in reference to Orion's belt, the most prominent feature of that constellation. Thanks to winning the first ever Japan Series, the Orions kept that nickname when they merged with the Dai Stars in 1957 to create the Daimai Orions. A move into Tokyo Stadium would see the club adopt the nickname Tokyo Orions in 1964, but that would only last until 1969, when Japanese Korean confectionery giants Lotte would buy sponsorship rights, and then the team itself in 1970. The name Lotte Orions would survive 2 moves, first to Sendai in 1973, then to Kawasaki in 1978, but by the time the team was set to move a 3rd time, the name Orions had long become stale. The Orions were set to move into the recently built Chiba Marine Stadium in 1992, which sat directly on Tokyo Bay. With what finally looked like a long-term stable home, the team wanted to rename themselves something to commemorate it. However, the two leading nicknames had problems. The name Chiba Lotte Dolphins was an early favorite, but it had a major issue. Every NPB team had a Latin initial that would show up on the scoreboard, and the aforementioned Chunichi Dragons already had D. While this hadn't been a problem with the Braves, Blue Wave, and Buffaloes, those two teams played in the same league. The Dragons were a Central League club. Not wanting to cause issues, the team shelved the idea. The other popular name was the Chiba Lotte Pirates, but that came with another issue. See, there was a manga called Tsutsumi Pirates, a sports shonen about a young ace of a team called the Chiba Pirates. The Chiba Pirates, canonically, are terrible. The Orions were coming off a 6th straight losing season, and they'd finished last in 3 of the last 4 years. The team didn't want to look even worse than they already were by associating themselves with an awful fictional baseball team. That and copyright law in Japan is an absolute mess, and they were unsure if they'd actually even be able to use it. So in the end, they threw their hands in the air and chose Marines, named after the stadium they were moving into. Since Marines had no one-to-one translation in Japanese, they told fans that it meant Heroes of the Sea, which is interesting considering what was going on 50 years prior. However, the name has stood the test of time, and the team has been the Chiba Lotte Marines ever since. Flashing back to 1935, one of the first companies that had jumped at the chance of joining the newly formed Japanese Professional Baseball League was the Hanshin Electric Railway Company. Although they initially founded their team as the Osaka Baseball Club, before they'd even played a game, the company decided they wanted a nickname. Firstly because the Giants had one, and secondly because they wanted to stand out from the crowd. Several names were put forth for the new club, but the one that won out was Tigers. The nickname is credited to Hanshin executive Saburo Matsubara, as his reason for choosing the name was what had won the company over. Matsubara had been to Detroit and thought the Detroit Tigers would be a team worth emulating. The Hanshin Sprawl was also, like Detroit, a major industrial area. It helped that the Detroit Tigers had just won the 1935 World Series. There is some speculation that if that World Series had gone the other way, the team might have been called the Osaka Cubs. Regardless, the team kept the nickname until the Tojo government forced them to drop it in 1940 when they banned English. The team was simply known as the Hanshin Baseball Club throughout the war. In 1946, the team brought back the name Osaka Tigers and used it until 1960. That year, the team decided to change their name to the Hanshin Tigers. Why? Well, despite having Osaka in their name, they didn't play in Osaka. Their home stadium, Hanshin Koshin Stadium, is in the suburb of Nishinomiya. But sure, a lot of teams play in suburbs, what makes this any different? Well, Nishinomiya isn't in Osaka Prefecture, it's in Hyogo Prefecture. There's also the fact that since they were the lone Kansai-based Central League club, adopting a name that covered more of the region made a lot of sense for reasons of marketing. Either way, they've been the Hanshin Tigers ever since. The team we now call the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks were founded as simply the Nankai Baseball Club in the fall of 1938. Since they were founded without a nickname, they weren't forced to drop it once Japan banned foreign words during the Second World War. However, the war did affect the team in another way. Trying to consolidate logistics, the Nankai Electric Railway Company was forced to merge with Kintetsu, and Kintetsu kept running the team as the Kinki Nippon Baseball Club. They also decided to get ahead of the curve when it came to giving the team a nickname. Seeking to emulate teams like the New York Yankees or Montreal Canadiens, the club decided to base their nickname on the ancient name for Japan, Yamato, which also happened to be the basis for the company logo. While the name Kinki Yamatos would have theoretically been allowed, seeing that the Giants, Tigers, and the half-revived Tokyo Senators were using English nicknames, Kintetsu elected to translate Yamato to English. The translation they went with was Great Ring. As you can imagine, Kinki Great Ring was not a name with staying power. Despite the club winning the first post-war JPBL championship in 1946, the mockery from American soldiers in the occupying forces was substantial. So when Nankai broke back off from Kintetsu in 1947, their first order of business was to adopt an actual nickname. Since Nankai's company logo was a winged wheel, they knew they wanted a bird. Cardinals was an early favorite, especially considering this was the era of Stan the Man, but red wasn't a company color for Nankai, so that was rejected. Condors was another name that was floated, but team president Takematsu Matsuura was bald, and very subconscious about it, so that got thrown to the wayside as well. The origin of the Hawks nickname is unclear, but it was the one that won out in the end. Considering the team immediately took home the 1948 JPBL title, it was here to stay. The club would be owned by Nankai for the next 40 years, but the Kansai baseball market had long been crowded, and by the late 80s, the major market of Fukuoka had been without a team for a decade. Nankai's company board had long wanted to be rid of the team, but Nankai owner Den Kawakatsu had doggedly refused, stating, "I will never sell the Hawks as long as I live." Then in 1988, he died. Nankai immediately announced that the team was up for sale, which naturally meant moving to Fukuoka. After losing the Lions, Fukuoka had doggedly tried to get a team back and had essentially rolled out the red carpet for any company that wanted to move the Hawks there. The two companies that sought to buy the club were DeNA, a supermarket chain, and the Matsushita Electric Company, who you may know better as Panasonic. DeNA won. Although there were initial fears that DeNA would change the team's name, they elected to keep it, seeing the connection with the team that were the kings of the PL in the 50s and 60s as more important than anything else. When SoftBank bought the club off the now bankrupt DeNA in 2005, they also elected to keep the name, as the team had won 2 titles under it in Fukuoka. The idea of putting a team in Hiroshima was always in the back of the JPBL's mind, and the main thing that had stopped it from happening was logistical issues, especially after the bomb. Hiroshima was always a baseball city through and through, with many of their top high schools either making deep runs or winning Koshin altogether. Hiroshima was also one of the regional capitals of Japan, an unofficial title that goes to the largest hub city in each of Japan's 8 regions, those being Sapporo, Sendai, Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka, Matsuyama, Fukuoka, and Hiroshima. So, as soon as the JPBL's restructuring into NPB and subsequent expansion for 1950 was announced, Hiroshima's political and business leaders got together and put forth an expansion bid, hoping to give the people of the rebuilding city hope for the future and something to rally around. While they were all in agreement about this, the one thing they weren't in agreement about was the nickname. Early names floated were the Hiroshima Bears, the Hiroshima Doves, the Hiroshima Rainbows, and even, morbidly, the Hiroshima Atoms. When polled, the public pushed for the revival of the semi-pro Hiroshima Greens, or Hiroshima Green Sox, sources vary, but all those were put to the side. The man at the forefront of Hiroshima's bid was the politician Noboru Tanegawa. Tanegawa wanted the name Carp. Why? Well, Hiroshima sits in the mouth of the Ota River. Every year, thousands of carp swim back up the Ota River to their spawning grounds, and every year, the set of rapids near Hiroshima Castle becomes a bit of a tourist destination. Hiroshima Castle is even colloquially known as Carp Castle for this very reason. Since the team was bankrolled by a consortium of Hiroshima companies, the team also wanted Hiroshima in their official name, and they're the only Asian club to have the city name in their official name for their entire existence. In fact, from 1969 to 1977, they were the only club to have their city in their official name. In 1968, Mazda completed their buyout of the team, and Toyo was added to the team's name in reference to them, as Mazda's official name is Toyo Kyogo. Even though Mazda was forced to sell their controlling stake after they were bought by Ford, they still maintain a minority stake in the team, and thus the team is still the Hiroshima Toyo Carp. In 1946, the JPBL had a problem. They only had 7 teams. While there had been 8 teams in their last full season in 1943, logistical issues prevented the Fukuoka-based Nishitetsu Baseball Club from returning to the pro ranks, as league officials elected to keep everything localized to Tokyo and Osaka. Osaka had the Osaka Tigers, the Pacific Baseball Club, Kinki Great Ring, and the Hankyu Baseball Club. Tokyo had the Giants and the Chiba Nippon Baseball Club, who'd elected to play in Tokyo while Nagoya rebuilt, so they needed 2 new teams. The first, the Gold Star Baseball Club, was founded by Michinori Tsubochi. They eventually became the Daiei Stars and, as stated earlier, merged into what is now the Chiba Lotte Marines. The other team was the one we now call the Hokkaido Nippon-Ham Fighters, then simply the Tokyo Senators. The Yokozawa brothers, Saburo and Shiichiro, had revived the club with hopes of returning them to their former glory. The name Senators had come from the fact that the Senators' original owner, Yorinari Arima, was a member of the House of Peers, the Japanese upper house. Since most democracies like the United States, Canada, and Australia refer to the upper house as a Senate, Arima chose the name in reference to himself because he would be considered a senator in any one of those countries. However, unlike the original club, the Yokozawa brothers had no money. There was also a lot of debate as to whether or not they were allowed to use the name, so when the Tokyo group bought the club for the equivalent of less than $20,000, they decided to change that name. The name they chose was Flyers, being a manifestation of the desire to leap into a new beginning. The team kept the name when Toei took over running the club, and then bought out the club entirely. When Itaku-Home briefly owned the club in 1973, they also kept the nickname, but their year of ownership was, not great. After attempting to organize a merger with the Lotte Orions, they were forced to sell. The team would be bought by Nippon-Ham. Nippon-Ham's owner Yoshinori Okuso wanted to signify a new beginning after 4 years of embarrassment from both the Black Mist scandal and Itaku-Home's ownership. So he put out a poll for a new name. The name that won the poll was Fighters, suggested by a high school girl from Okayama. The girl had been a longtime fan of the club and Okayama native Katsuo Osugi, who she described as a fierce fighter, which is one way to describe his notorious hot-headedness, but alright. Still, Okuso liked the nickname and adopted it. Osugi only played 1 year on the team that was named after him, as he was traded to the Yakult Swallows in the 1974-75 offseason, as new GM Osamu Mihara elected to purge the old guard. I wonder how the girl felt about that. Anyways, after the 2003 season, the Fighters would leave Tokyo for Sapporo and adopted the name Hokkaido Nippon-Ham Fighters to reflect their new home, and they've been called that ever since. The team that is now called the Tokyo Yakult Swallows was founded in 1950 by the newly formed Japanese National Railways. After some early struggles with worker and public relations, as soon as they heard that the JPBL would be expanding, Japanese National Railways elected to form a team and join the league, both to get their name out there and give their many employees who played corporate ball within the company something to aspire to. Unlike the other railway companies that had started teams like Nankai, Kintetsu, and Nishitetsu, JNR explicitly wanted a railway-themed name. An early favorite was Express. However, this created an issue. Despite baseball being Japan's most popular sport, not everybody followed or even cared about it. So if the layperson saw the headline Kokutetsu Express, they naturally would have thought that that was referring to a train. Now imagine, if you will, the team goes on a losing streak. The headline would probably read something along the lines of JNR Express crashes. Put 2 and 2 together, and now you see the problem. So that nickname was scrapped. Other names were put forward, including things like Whistles, Elephants, Service, and Centipedes, but the one that won out was Swallows. The name was in reference to a famous express train from the 1920s and 30s, called Tsubame, or the Swallow, which traveled from Tokyo to Kobe at the blistering speed of 90 kilometers an hour. JNR had acquired the rights to use that name, and it now graced their express trains, which could get people from Tokyo to Kobe in under 8 hours, which for 1949 was incredibly fast. So naturally, the pride of the company would be a fitting name for the baseball team. But I hear you. What makes this any different from Express? Well, that's actually quite simple. Tsubame referred to the train. Swarozu referred to the team. The team would keep that nickname until 1966. In the previous years, the Sankei Shimbun had bought into the team, and JNR had elected to sell their stake to them after they'd been forced to trade face of the franchise Masaichi Kaneda. Sankei wanted a new name, and since the paper was both pro-nuclear energy and was the publisher of Astro Boy, or Mighty Atom as he is known in Japan, the team became the Sankei Atoms. Sankei quickly realized that running a baseball team was a lot harder than they thought it would be, so they quickly looked to sell. Yakult agreed to buy the team, but as the deal was hashed out over the course of the 1969 season, the team would simply be known as the Atoms Baseball Club. Yakult would keep the name Atoms, but after the studio behind Astro Boy went bankrupt in 1973, they looked for a new nickname. Fans immediately clamored for the return of the old name, however, Yakult was reluctant. They instead put forth names like Firemen, Bears, and Jaguars. The team would choose Jaguars initially, but when they announced the name at the 1973 All-Star Game, it was met with a chorus of boos from the team's faithful. The team immediately saw sense, scrapped the plans to change it after the All-Star Game, and readopted Swallows in 1974. A Japan Series title in 1978 would solidify the nickname forevermore. In 2006, Tokyo would be added to the front of the team's name at the request of several veteran players, and they've been the Tokyo Yakult Swallows ever since. So, The Orix Buffaloes' nickname history is a little complicated, so bear with me. The team that is now the Orix Buffaloes was founded in 1936 as the Hankyu Baseball Club. They kept that name throughout the war, and when the nickname mandate came in 1947, the team originally planned to take the name Bears. This was clearly a jab at their Nishinomiya rivals, the Osaka Tigers. However, Bear had negative financial connotations, and since the team struggled in their first preseason, ownership decided that it was bad luck and changed the name. The name they chose was Braves, and it was basically picked out of a hat by the club on opening day. While the team was evidently named after the Boston Braves, the two teams had basically no connection to one another. Hankyu also didn't use any Native American iconography, with their logo instead depicting a Roman legionnaire. Despite this last-minute change in name, it proved to stick, and would be used by the club until 1990. In 1988, Hankyu would regrettably sell the Braves. Hankyu founder Ichizo Kobayashi had decreed before his death that the company must never, under any circumstances, sell his two passion projects, the Braves and a theater company, the Takarazuka Revue. Hankyu would eventually be forced to sell the Braves to keep the Revue afloat, as they could not finance both. The company that bought the team was Orix, an Osaka-based financial services company. The team initially kept the name Braves, but chose to change the name when they moved the team to Kobe in 1991. When a name poll was first put out, the fans responded overwhelmingly that they wanted to keep the name Braves. Orix, unlike Yakult, didn't take the hint, so they put out a second poll where they told the fans that Braves wasn't allowed. So the fans chose Thunder. This was in reference to the team's Blue Thunder batting line of Yasuo Fuji, Greg Boomer Wells, Hiromitsu Karata, Hiromi Matsunaga, Kazuhiko Ishimine, and Shinichi Murakami. Those seven combined to create one of the most dominant offensive units of their era in 1990. Orix ignored it. They chose Blue Wave. Fans were pissed, not just because of the name change, not just because they were ignored, but it also didn't fit their new home at all. While we know it now as Haramato Field, at the time, the stadium they were moving into was called Kobe Green Sports Park, often shortened to Green Stadium. So the Blue Wave were playing in Green Stadium in the green hills of a city whose official color is green. While the name is often looked back fondly, mainly by people who associate it with Ichiro, the name was never popular with fans, which made it very easy to drop when the club merged with the Kintetsu Buffaloes after the 2004 season. The Kintetsu Buffaloes were originally founded as the Kintetsu Pearls in 1950. This is because Kintetsu's main offices were in Mie Prefecture, not the team's home of Osaka Prefecture. Mie is famous for its pearl industry, and thus the name made perfect sense on paper. However, the team was awful. In 1959, they hired Hall of Famer Shigeru Chiba to manage the club. Chiba agreed on one condition: change the name. So the club decided to rename themselves the Kintetsu Buffalo in reference to Chiba, who was nicknamed the Bull or the Buffalo during his playing career. But this led to another problem. While the name Buffalo was grammatically correct, it didn't look correct to the team's fan base, most of whom didn't speak English, but knew the basics of singular and plural. So after Chiba resigned in 1961, having failed to get the club out of the basement, the team lengthened the name to Buffaloes. Their explanation of wanting the entire team to be fierce Buffaloes and not just the manager was also a jab at Chiba as he went out the door. The Buffaloes' name stood the test of time and pain. Lots of pain. And so it was chosen by Orix after the merger in an attempt to placate Buffalo's fans after the merger. The older K-Buffs fans I know personally called it a slap in the face, especially with the team disregarding Kintetsu's records and retired numbers. Still, they've been the Orix Buffaloes ever since. The team we now call the Yokohama BayStars was founded by Toyo Fisheries in 1950. This is not to be confused with the Toyo that owned the Robins before Shochiku, as Toyo is Japanese for Pacific, so naturally there's a lot of companies with that name in Japan. Toyo Fisheries had been lured in after several of their corporate ball stars had been poached by other expansion teams. One of the things Toyo was most famous for was whaling, and thus the team became the Toyo Whales. After the Robins were expelled from NPB following 1952, the clubs briefly merged, creating the Yosho Robins. But after 2 years, Toyo would buy out Shochiku, bring back the Whales name, and move the team to Kanagawa Prefecture, where they've been based for the last 70 years. After 23 years in Kawasaki, the Whales would move into the newly built Yokohama Stadium. To celebrate their move into the larger city, the club adopted the nickname Yokohama Toyo Whales, joining the Carp as the only teams to have their city name in their official name. The team kept the name until the 90s, when two things happened. One, Maruha Fisheries would dissolve the Toyo brand, And 2, the fans' calls to change the name were growing louder and louder. Decades of international pressure had made whaling a cultural faux pas in Japan, and since the team was a perennial basement dweller, fans felt the nickname was both in poor taste and bad luck, so Maruha sat down to change it. The biggest landmark in Yokohama is the Bay Bridge, so Maruha wanted something commemorating that. They decided on the name Yokohama Bay Stars. That's Yokohama Bay Stars. However, in general conversation, fans started referring to the new nickname as BayStars. Instead of correcting it, the team adopted it and became the Yokohama BayStars, although apparently no one told Baseball Reference. If you're wondering, how does Yokohama get away with using a B nickname when Lotte didn't feel like they could get away with a D nickname? Well, that's simple. The Blue Wave used BW, the Buffaloes used BU, and the BayStars used YB. Anyways, in 2011, mobile game developer DeNA would buy into the team, and the club would become the Yokohama DeNA BayStars. And while DeNA has tried to insert itself into every part of the team's culture, including changing the team's songs' lyrics to fit them, most fans still refer to the team as just the Yokohama BayStars. The team we now know as the Saitama Seibu Lions was founded in Fukuoka as the Nishitetsu Clippers in 1950. Nishitetsu, who'd previously owned a team in 1943, chose that name because they were the company that Pan American had partnered with to run the Japanese side of their operations. However, Nishitetsu would buy their fellow Fukuoka club, the Nishi Nippon Pirates, after the 1950 season. Naturally, this led to the worst players in the Clippers being let go to make way for the best players in the Pirates. The Clippers players were none too happy about that, and demanded a change to the nickname, not wanting these Pirates players to wear a Clippers uniform. Coincidentally, Nishitetsu and Pan Am had also stopped working together, so they were open to changing the nickname. Like most teams, they put out a fan poll, but unlike most teams, they actually chose the winning name, Lions. The name has stood the test of time. It survived Nishitetsu offloading the club to a shell company following the Black Mist scandal, it survived the hellish mediocrity of the Fukuoka Baseball Club era, and it survived Seibu purchasing the team and moving them to Tokorozawa, Saitama in 1979. The team would become the Saitama Seibu Lions in 2008, with the name change reflecting the growing trend of city and region names being added to teams. The longevity of the nickname is probably helped by the fact that the teams won 13 championships, tied for the second most in Japanese professional baseball. I already covered the story of the Yomiuri Giants getting their nickname in my last video, but I might as well give the Cliff Notes version here. In 1934, the team was founded as the Dai Nippon Tokyo Yaku Club to take on a team of MLB All-Stars invited by Yomiuri president Matsutaro Shoriki. Shoriki was convinced to get a professional baseball league going and would send the team to do a tour of North America to get them ready while he organized it. When the team arrived in San Francisco Seals manager Lefty O'Doul would suggest that the club take on a nickname in order to sell more tickets on their tour. O'Doul would put forth the name Giants. He argued that since Tokyo was the New York of Japan, the team should look to emulate a New York-based MLB club. The team agreed, took on the nickname, and after an incredibly successful tour, they chose to keep the name they'd bonded over. While the team would be forced to change their name to just the Kyojin Baseball Club during the Second World War, other than that, they've always been the Giants. The 9 JPBL titles and 22 Japan Series titles has probably helped with that. While I already made a video that went over the Buffaloes Blue Wave merger in 2004 and the fallout it caused, to make a long story short, the NPB would take the chaos their short-sighted decisions had made and use the fan and player uproar to their advantage. They declared that any expansion team would have to be based out of Sendai, which hadn't had a team full-time since the Lotte Orions left after 1977. This would not only free up a new expansion team from any direct competition, but it would also take another regional capital off the list. The 2 expansion bids came from Livedoor and Rakuten. Livedoor called themselves the Sendai Livedoor Phoenix, as they were rising from the ashes of the Kintetsu Buffaloes, and Rakuten called their bid the Tohoku Rakuten Golden Eagles. Rakuten's name reflected the fact that the team would not only be representing just Sendai, but the entire region of Tohoku, and the nickname Golden Eagles was taken from the fact that golden eagles are a very common sight in Tohoku's mountains. Rakuten would win the bid, and the name stuck. As always, a big thank you to my patrons, and an especially big thanks to my roster patrons, Edmund Dickinson, Matt Lang, and Tom Musa, and my face of the franchise patron, Anthony Pang, who's been around for a long while. Thank you so much, Anthony. This wasn't the video I initially planned to make. I have another script done However, I was advised by a friend of mine who is a lawyer that I probably shouldn't make it, given the fact that I don't really want to see the inside of a civil courtroom right now, even though I would be in the right. Slap suits are a thing, and I don't want to deal with that. Anyways, so that's where I've been. If you made it this far, please like, comment, subscribe, boost this video in the algorithm however much you can. If that newfangled button is there, press it. That'd be awesome. And other than that, I've been Gaijin Baseball. Peace.